In addition to the community literacies, students also worked hard to develop their academic English literacies. So to do this, they first looked at the textual aspects of language, including things like grammar and stylistics, and then they went into the rhetorical aspects of language. So they became the investigators of language and language use, and they learned that languages can be taken apart and analyzed, which is not just a skill for academics, but also for life in general. Everything is student-centered in that whatever they need, that's important, and we want to start with giving that to them. And activities are based on what they want, what they need, what's interesting to them, like our research projects where they choose their own topics. And it's a very constructivist type of environment where meaning is not just transferred from teacher to student, but students create meaning and create knowledge amongst themselves.
There was a law the government enforces called Title IX, and it required schools to allow equal opportunity for females and males to participate in activities.
The research paper was actually very complicated for some of them, but learning to do it was really important for them because most of them want to go on to college, and so they started off by doing research. They had to have a certain amount of references. They had to gather credible information from books, print sources, as well as the internet, and they had to write their papers. They wrote it incrementally, but the beginning part was a literature review, and of course it had to be in APA format. And this is actually a skill that they'd been practicing since their freshman year, but they did get to review it and become a little more accurate in doing it. And then the second part of their paper was they had to write up summaries of the interviews they did, as well as the novels that they read. And finally, they had to do a critical analysis. So the last section of the paper was actually more focused on what do I really think about these things, and they had to take a critical standpoint about everything that they had learned throughout the process, and write it up and give their own opinions and talk about what they learned. One of the main goals of our program in Year 3 was to both enhance and broaden the academic literacies students learned in the previous 2 years. So with that objective in mind, the overarching theme of diversity was chosen as a content for Year 3. We especially focused on 3 different types of discrimination, which were racism, sexism, and classism. For classism, first students had to actually think about what classism is, and they knew the term socioeconomic status, but there's so much more to classism than just how much money a person makes. For example, the way someone talks or acts or dresses, where they live, what they drive, things like that. And so we started off by talking about those issues and later went into looking at different graphs and charts from the US Census. And students got a chance to see which groups make more than other groups or live in certain areas. After looking at class issues on a national level, students then took a look at locally how different ethnic groups vary in the amount of money they make or jobs that they have. And they also talked about reasons perhaps why there are different discrepancies between ethnic groups class-wise. Field trip that students got to go on was to the Japanese Cultural Center in Honolulu, and one of the main things they learned was that discrimination didn't just happen such a long time ago. I mean, World War II and the Japanese-American internment was fairly recent, and not only that, but they were able to link those events and discrimination against that group during a time of war to current events now, especially after 9/11, and the way there was almost the same thing happening to Muslim Americans and how Japanese Americans spoke out on their behalf. So students got to see that these things are present in their lives.
My research paper is about the Japanese culture in Hawaii. So from that field trip, I really learned a lot, because before I haven't learned the internment camps. Well, I knew about Pearl Harbor and the plantation, but I didn't know about the internment camps. I was really surprised because I never knew it happened, and it was really cruel back then for the US doing that to the Japanese. Yeah, it was really unfair for the Japanese back then, and I feel really sorry for what happened back then.
We learned mostly about like the black people being discriminated, their right not having equal rights as white people, the Japanese during the World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They were all considered a threat to America, so they're all put in internment camps and treated badly. I believe learning our mistakes will help us prevent from making the same mistakes in the future, and maybe find better solutions than the solutions we had in the past.
Students learning about diversity at a young age like this is really crucial. If it were part of the curriculum everywhere, we'd have such a huge leap ahead in terms of where we need to be in this world. Understanding different cultures, different points of view, these are skills that the students will carry forward with them for the rest of their lives. And here's the other thing, these kids are ready for it. Kids are so smart. We don't believe that kids can handle this kind of subject matter. And the truth is, kids think about this stuff all the time.